Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of All Things Crime. I am beyond excited this morning. I have a special guest named Paul Hutchinson. And Paul is the executive producer behind the smash movie Sound of Freedom. And if you haven't had a chance to go see Sound of Freedom, you absolutely need to go see it. This movie is about, it's absolute. Well, if you don't know about it, then you've been living in a rock, to be honest. And it's one of those movies that it came in a kind of a weird, just non-traditional way to reach the theaters. And I'm going to have Paul explain that, of course, but most importantly is the mission behind the movie. And I really invited Paul on here to talk about child sex trafficking and just the blight on the entire world that entire industry is. $150 billion industry. And it's just a sick practice and needs to stop. And I think Paul is one of the main guys that's going to help have that, make that happen. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jared.
And it's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Excited to share with your audience.
Yeah. Oh, it's, I've been reading up on you and, it's interesting. I've been on your website as well as, what is it? IMBD. That's the kind of the Hollywood website. And one of the first things, I love to know kind of who I'm dealing with and who I'm talking with. And I could tell a lot about you just based on the different descriptions from those two websites. And, other than, being knighted by the Knights of Templar, I think the rest of the accolades that IMBD gave you weren't near as important as what I think you had on your website. And I just want to give this to my audience. This is a quote on your website. And it says, "He who has a powerful positive impact in the most lives wins." And, Paul, I think that says a lot about you. You are the type of guy that honestly the world needs. And I know you're probably not one to, really, dwell too much on accolades, but man, I just want to tell you right up front, we appreciate what you do, and God bless all of your efforts and everybody that you're working with.
Thank you, Jared. Most important part of that sentence was everybody I'm working with. I will say this: in the Sound of Freedom movie, there are hundreds of unsung heroes, and many of these men and women are still today undercover. They don't need their faces known. They can't, because of the work that they're doing. Yet they were very much involved, not only in the Colombia rescue mission, but many of the other ones that were portrayed in that movie. And, of course you have to take a lot of different roles and put them all together in a few characters, but they're good people everywhere that are fighting this fight, that are rescuing the children, that are doing so from a place of the heart, a place of integrity, and doing it for the right reasons. And I respect those men and women.
Yeah. So you have been on over 70 of these rescue missions, and Sound of Freedom obviously focuses just on the one there in Colombia. Where do we go with this? There's so many questions I have. So,
well, I can tell you where it started with Sound of Freedom, and then you can ask some questions about some individual missions. The one in Cartagena, Colombia, was my first. That was 10 years ago, okay. Just under 10 years ago. And Jared, that galvanized my commitment to eradicate this problem. You can't unsee something that dark. At one point, I was sitting on a chair around this table with the traffickers and some of our operators, and the traffickers got up and went in the house where they were keeping the children, and you could hear some of the children crying. And about 10 minutes later, they came out and they had four virgins, scared to death, 3 little girls, 1 little boy. This little boy, they had given him cocaine because he was so scared it was going to hurt. I mean, what kind of monster thinks that that's attractive? And I was sitting on a chair, and they presented this little 11-year-old girl, the same one that in the movie that they were kind of focused on. They called her Princess. She actually was there at that island, at that rescue. And we just took a lot of different stories together and put them into the movie. But she was standing in front of me, scared to death, shaking, Jared. And there was, they had put makeup on her face, and you could tell that she had been crying because of the tears that had run her makeup. And she was looking at me with this fear in her eyes, like I was the guy who was there to defile her. And I was so glad it was us there and not some monster. And I took her little hands, looked in her eyes, and I asked her name. I said, "¿Cómo te llamas?" And she didn't answer. I'm sure it's because her real name wasn't Princess. She was trying to figure out what she should say. And I said, "Está bien." And I told the traffickers, look, we got to still negotiate, send her back in the house. But I made a commitment at that moment to myself, to God, to that child, that I would spend my life eradicating that problem. So I spent the next 10 years helping with that foundation and many others on many undercover operations, and led or played a key part in over 70. And we can go into depth on a bunch of them in 15 different countries, where the kids came from and how we took these guys down. But the moment that changed my life forever was seeing her eyes, making that commitment. And then half an hour later, after the agents came and stormed the party, and the Child Protective Services people came in the house with the children, and they started laughing and singing with the children. And that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. That's why we named the movie The Sound of Freedom. And I told him, I said, I've spent my whole life making rich people richer in, my investing world. And I want to make a difference. I want to help. What can I do? And if my skill sets, if my resources, if my whatever can help in fixing that problem, I'm all in. So that's where it all started for me.
Wow. Geez, Paul, where do we go from there?
In the movie, just for reference, in the movie, my character was Pablo. So I was still undercover, of course, when we filmed the movie. I didn't ever think that I would ever be public. And so we didn't name him Paul Hutchinson. We actually found a Latin actor. It's the same one who's the producer of the film, Eduardo Verástegui, plays the Pablo, the investment manager who quits his job to go help in this plight of rescuing the kids. And for the next year and a half, they had me continue to play that role. I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul Stone. The problem was this: there was a lot of guys like Jeffrey Epstein, right? They're wealthy, they're well-spoken, they're connected, they're got big ass egos, and the sting operation in multiple countries for the next year plus was to have the operators go deep cover, find these traffickers, and then tell them, hey, we've got a wealthy boss that's interested in these horrible things and whatnot, and get them to bring all of their inventory and connect them with a bunch of other traffickers in the region to pull all the kids together for one sting opportunity where we could rescue them all. And that could only happen if, they had a rich playboy. And Jared, I was kind of who I was a rich playboy. I mean, I had built a big company. I had a basketball court in my basement. I had huge parties and nice cars, and I never did anything immoral or illegal, but I definitely had that image that they were looking to promote, and it worked very, very well. And so, but then after a year and a half of doing that, the foundation that I was helping provide services at the time, their board of directors decided that it was too dangerous for their teams to do the deep cover, to go in and, 2 a.m. in downtown Mexico City and find and connect with the traffickers. And I had gotten really good at this undercover stuff, and I had some other skills that made it somewhat safe in a dangerous place. And so I was asked to move into that new role where I wasn't the rich guy anymore. I was a guy working for a rich guy, and where I was guys in one place in Haiti, I was asked to go in posing as a doctor. There was a little boy who was kidnapped in front of a church house. His father was serving as a bishop in Haiti, and they had some other leads that they believed he was in this region, and there was a whole bunch of other trafficked victims that were in this area. So anyway, I was asked to change roles, and that's where it got really interesting. Me being able to be face to face with the most evil part of humanity, people selling 8, 9, 10-year-old children, and convincing them to bring their children to a certain place, or geotagging the location that they were keeping them. It was eye-opening, to say the least. And in fact, if your audience has ever watched the documentary Operation Toussaint was about the rescue that we did in Haiti. I had a friend that had a yacht that provided the yacht for this. We had some high-level influencers, celebrities that were there watching. I had been deep cover for months in cutting the head off the dragon, wanted to just take down trafficking. You don't see me in the movie. You do. My face is blurred and I'm laughing with the traffickers, but you don't have cameras when you're 2 a.m. in downtown Pétionville outside of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And but at the end of that film, you see there's this little 14-year-old girl. Her face is blurred. She's holding a teddy bear, and she was taken when she was 7. Her parents were killed in the earthquake. Nobody knew she was alive. And this happens a lot in situations like earthquakes or wars like in Ukraine right now, where there's a lot of displacement and the traffickers will move in. So she was taken 7 years before, and she was sold for sex 10, 15, 20 times a day for 7 years. And we were the first people to find her. It was me and one of my operators. It was about 2 a.m, really dangerous area of town. We had worked our way up to what I call a level 3 trafficker. These are the ones who physically hold the children in captivity. The other ones are ones that are, creating the demand or whatnot. But at that point, you say, look, my boss will kill me and my whole family if I taste the candy before the party, but I have to verify you have it. So I'll give you $100 for each one or $20 for each one that I can see. And then they take you physically to where they're holding them. And there was this door. It was like 4 feet wide. It was about 7 feet tall, steel, rusted on the side. Dangerous area of town. There was a female trafficker. We called her Cho. She sticks a key in this door, opens it up, and there's this dirt hallway, dimly lit, got cobwebs, and there was multiple cell doors down the left-hand side. I'm talking no windows, no access other than these steel doors down this hallway. And she opens up one of these doors, and the first thing that I see is, it's not even a bed. It's a steel plank with held to the wall with a chain so that it could kind of be folded up, and a dirt floor, very small room, maybe 6 feet wide, if that, and 6 by 6 is all. And to the left of that was a concrete block. And this child was sitting on that concrete block, looks at me with this blank look in her eyes, like, this has happened for 7 years. I've given up. I wasn't there, but after we rescued her, I was told that she didn't speak for 2 weeks, and that the first words she said were, "I didn't think anybody would come." She had given up hope. 6.5 years before. And Jared, what makes me so mad is that every single man who walked through that door for 7 years was there to harm her. We were the first ones to walk through that door that didn't have that intention. Why would two guys from Utah be at 2 a.m. in Patienville outside of Port-au-Prince? Why? Because somebody has to stand up to this evil. And every one of these kids have stories very similar to that. Now she's in a healthy family, learning to dance, back to school. So anyway, I'll let you ask the questions. I just ramble sometimes.
It's so interesting to me I mean, the whole reason that I started this podcast is because I've realized in the course of working with law enforcement and, over the last 10, 11 years, just how, I don't want to say clueless, but how
Uninformed
few details people really understand about the investigative process, how people actually solve crime. But in the course of that, I've also come to realize that there's very few people that fully, maybe they don't recognize it, maybe they don't want to recognize it, and I'm sure there's a lot of that. But the level of evil that's out there, and the amount of pain and suffering and damage that one human can inflict on another human is something that I think most people maybe they just can't process it, and that's why they just kind of pretend that it's not happening. But when you're talking about even here in the United States, some of the murders and rapes and robberies and carjackings and especially so many problems that we're seeing now, how horrible that is. But then, Paul, what you just described to me, I mean, and I appreciate you going through that, and I know it's probably even difficult to relive it. But to me, somebody that can actually do that to a child, I have 2 daughters, and the thought of one of my daughters being in a situation like that, there's no amount of pain that I wouldn't inflict on those people to get my daughter out of there. And I know that every single dad that is worth his weight in salt would be the same way. And so I guess my first question is how did you maintain composure and maintain your cover when going into those kind of situations? You see what's happening, and especially, I mean, the first time is probably you're just experiencing it. You're just hoping that you get out of there alive.
Well, and I'll tell you,
I imagine when you're
the very first,
go ahead,
the very first time I was face to face with a trafficker was in Cartagena, Colombia. I had gotten a call from the Homeland Security agent who said, "Paul, we found all these children down here, and there's more than 100 in the surrounding areas, and I think we can rescue them all in one day, and I'd like your help." And I said, "How much do you need?" He said, "Well, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days?" He said, "I have to have somebody who can negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate deal with the traffickers." He said the head trafficker's got a piece of property he wants to develop into a child brothel, sex resort, hotel. He needs a few $1 million to make it happen. He said, our goal is to convince him that you'll fund it under one condition, that you'll have a party in a couple weeks. He calls all his other friends who are trafficking children. They bring their inventory together. And if you're happy with what he provides, then you'll consider his project. And so that's what the role is. And 2 days later, I'm in Colombia. I'm face to face with these people. And halfway through this meeting, one of the traffickers leans forward and he said, "Pablo, yeah, I have a gift for you." I said, "Really? What's your gift?" And he shows me his phone, and there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. He said, "This is Princess. She's still a virgin. We just took delivery of some. Now, in the movie, that part was depicted by Tim handing me my driver a picture, and that's what made me change my mind and decide to do it. In reality, I was already there. I was already face to face with these guys, and it was a trafficker that showed me that picture. But that galvanized my commitment right there. And the Navy SEAL that was right behind me, because he was there as my real bodyguard and my show bodyguard, and because I was this wealthy guy that was going to fund their deal, he excuses himself. He goes, guys, I'm gonna go walk around the restaurant. I'm gonna just make sure everything's good. So he walks around, and later when we were debriefing, he said, that little girl that he showed you on the phone looked much like my own daughter at home. He said, I almost unholstered my weapon and just took him out right there. He said, I knew that if we did, though, that we would lose those kids, the rest of them, and because we wouldn't know where they were. And when he showed me that picture and said, we just took delivery, I realized if we could get these kids out before they were ever raped the first time, that would be a miracle. And something he said made me realize he had more than her. I said, Fuego, I said, you have more virgins? Oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 more. I said, you have to bring those to the party. I'm very interested in those. We had to get them out too. He goes, oh no. He said, they're too expensive. Too expensive. I'm already paying $25,000 for this party, paying $500 per child for 50 children just for 2 hours in the afternoon with them. He says, Jefe, you already paid $25,000. You want to F these other virgins. It's going to cost you maybe $2,000, maybe $5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you maybe $10,000 more. That's the kind of conversation we're having. And he's talking about these children like they're commodities. I was so mad. I've got a really nice shirt on. I've got a really expensive cufflinks, right? I've got a really nice watch. And I'm like, you don't think I can afford an extra? Because I was playing that role of the guy who can come down, right? I'm like, put my hands on my chest. I'm like, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He goes, oh no, Jefe, no. I said, I was literally mad. I wasn't pretending mad. I said, I want every one of those virgins at the party. And they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me and my guys. You understand? He's, oh, Jefe, I understand. This stupid smile on his face. Now, the female trafficker, the one that's in the movie that had the modeling agency, she objects at this point. Now, this part of the conversation was more in Spanish because she didn't speak in English. My Spanish sucks, so it was translated. But what she said is, "Oh no, we can't bring those virgins." And I'm like, why? Why not? And for a minute, we thought that she had a heart, that she had some kind of compassion there. And she said, "Well, we just got them. They're not ready." They're not ready. What do you mean? Well, we have to show them pornography. We have to let them watch live sex acts. We'll probably have to give them some drugs. Otherwise, they're going to cry. But if you're okay if they cry, then I'm okay if they go. There was no compassion there. It was her worrying that them crying would affect my guests at the party. This is the darkness that happens. It is real. You know, these news pundits out there and the a lot of the big media saying, Sound of Freedom, that doesn't happen. I was there, right? Now, yes, not everything happened exactly like the movie. That little boy coming across the border was years before the little girl in Colombia, and they weren't related, but he did have a sister that was missing, and they were taken in a very similar way. We took multiple real stories and put them together. Now, in the jungle, I didn't get shot at in the jungle. That was dramatization a little bit on the end part of that. And, we took other operators and things they did and put those all into the same storyline. But it's real nonetheless. That darkness exists. And parents ask, okay, I left the movie. What do I do? How do I help? What's next? Well, the worst thing that can happen is for somebody to decide they want to go be a Rambo and go undercover in some other country and find kids. No, we had very close relationships with the federal agents of those countries. It was very well planned out. Don't do that. The best thing that you can do, believe it or not, the best thing you can do is hug your kids. People are like, well, how's that going to help? Well, the majority of children that are trafficked today are not being abducted from an affluent neighborhood in a healthy family. right? The majority of them come from a broken foster care program. They come from runaways. They come from broken families. They come from if a child is still in a family, it's a child who doesn't have a healthy relationship with the parents. The truth is, the majority of children who are sold for sex sleep in their own beds at night. That'll surprise a lot of people. They're like, what? No, I thought this was all kids that got abducted from one country and sent in container ships to another one. No, it's your babysitter. It's your sister-in-law. It's your uncle. It's their uncle. It's the neighbor. And if you have a relationship with your children that is such that your daughter can come to you and say, hey, Dad, I feel uncomfortable when you make me hug Uncle Harry. Or, when I go over to this friend's house, her brother hugs me really weird and his hand is, or he's showing me some pornography, or the babysitter says I should trust her more than you guys, and she's showing me some movies I don't feel comfortable. You need to have the relationship with your kids where those grooming tactics will come out very easily in your conversation with them, because that is where they're most susceptible. In fact, the reality is 1 out of every 4 women that you know right now, 1 out of every 4 women that's listening to this have been a victim of sexual violence as a child. And the average age that somebody comes out and says, hey, I was abused as a child, I was sold in this way, the average age is 52 years old. People are holding on to this trauma their entire life. For men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in 5 at some time in their life. But even then, there's 25% of them, literally 200 million men in this world, that it was under the age of 10 years old, most of them in their own homes. So you've got generational trauma of people who have unresolved trauma now, God bless them. The majority of those people, 2/3 of people who have experienced, here's my freaking thing, 2/3 of those people who have experienced sexual trauma or other kind of child abuse, 2/3 of them grow up with a solid commitment. They will use that pain to ensure the innocence and the protection of children, and God bless them. But literally 1/3 of people who have experienced abuse as a child end up being contact offenders. So what do? Do we arrest them all before they ever do it? Or do we come from a place of compassion and say, okay, once you've crossed that line, you're going to jail, right? You touch a child. However, what if we had a time machine and went back before those traffickers ever did that? We would save all of those kids. We don't have time machines, but what we do have is hundreds of millions of people who we can help them shed their trauma. That 1/3 that could end up growing up to pass it on, and that's no excuse. But what if we could help them heal? That's what liberating humanity is all about. Now, yes, I know that a lot of your listeners are like, okay, let's get into the crime. Let's punch them all in the face. Let's shoot them all in the head, right? But the truth is, yes, we've got to fight fire with fire. Yes. When I'm undercover, I'm a sheepdog, right? I've got fangs that look as mean as the wolf, and I'm protecting those sheep. But what if we could keep the wolf from ever becoming a wolf? What if we could keep him far away? What if we could make it so that all of the children are rescued before they were ever trafficked? That's the riddle we have to figure out right there.
Oh, 100%. Wow. Yeah, and I've in multiple shows in the past, I have talked about, honestly, I think these sex crimes, especially the ones against children, are actually more damaging than even homicides, because, when a loved one is murdered, then their pain is gone. Obviously their memories and the act that lingers, but the psychological damage, the physical damage, the ongoing memories that this child is going to grow up with and maintain and think about, and especially if it happens over extended period of time, then the psyche of that person is so damaged that it can be generational. And to me, it's just, I understand and especially because most murders are, it's an act of rage or jealousy or something like that. And it's kind of a one-time thing, but, boy, the evil that you talk about, and I appreciate you explaining all that and just kind of, laying it out there for us, is just that what derangement do these people have to have in their minds that they look at a child, an innocent young child, and just look at it like a piece of meat that is so much more valuable than, even a prostitute or another person. It's just to maybe get into that a little bit, Paul. I mean, when you talk about, being face to face with a trafficker, so, I mean, you seem like you're a man of faith and family, and you understand, you've had the good life. You understand the good that can come from life. And then you run in face to face with somebody like that. What is that experience like?
Well, I'll tell you, after that first encounter at that restaurant in Cartagena, and we told them, look, I'm going to be having a party in a couple of weeks, and you just bring all your inventory together. And I stayed in contact over that 2-week period. I exchanged phone numbers and my new undercover number in WhatsApp with the trafficker that had the piece of property that he wanted to develop into the child brothel sex resort. And I still have screenshots of that conversation back and forth. Here's what's scary, Jared. He had kids of his own. He sent me a picture of him smiling with his 3-year-old daughter in his back seat. Now, this guy had 14 children that he was selling, right? And many of these traffickers sell their own kids. Now, he wasn't selling his 3-year-old yet. But he said, I think that God sent you to me, because now with this resort I'm building, I'm going to have all the money I need to take care of, my family and whatever else. And I'm like, you're right. God did send me to you so that I can ensure that 3-year-old doesn't have to grow up with a man who's selling children and who will likely sell her. It's interesting how many of these traffickers have had. I actually bought jewelry off of the traffickers. They would have a chain that, and you would think that these chains would have like devil horns and like satanic. No, a lot of these traffickers had crosses on their chains. I'm like, really? Is that you just trying to justify what that? Do you not have a conscience? Do you not understand that Christ's teachings were the farthest away from what you're doing that you could possibly imagine, right? And it was a strange phenomenon how many of them were kind of trying to justify or make up for the evil by having their rosary or having their cross or whatever else. And that was fascinating to me. Not very many of these traffickers had tattoos of scorpions on their cheeks, Now,
yeah,
there were a lot that were, and there were some super dangerous situations that we were in with some pretty high level traffickers that were super smart. And I had one where we had connected with this one trafficker. And he was like 6'3", big guy, and everybody cowered to him, scared to death of this guy. The guys in the clubs everywhere was just, you could tell he was man in charge. And then he said to me, he said, Pablo, he called me up on my burner phone. He goes, we need to meet. We connect together, and he jumps in the car. I've got my operators in there. I said, we're going to go see some more children, because if he takes me where the kids are, then we can geotag them, right? And I said, Leonard, we're setting this up for my boss. You take me more kids, I'll pay you some more. So he had taken us to some of the places that were holding the kids. And then he said, I'm going to take you to, he says, I'm the king, right? I said, what do you mean you're king? He said, I'm the boss. I said, oh yeah, it's very obvious. You're the boss of this whole city. He said, every boss has a boss, and I'm going to take you to see my boss. He said, he's in charge. He's in charge of everything from this city to this city, and his family's in charge of most of the country. And his family was like cartel, hardcore. We found out later he wasn't connected with them, but he was running the entire cartel organization in that area. And we get out of the car. He's man in charge, and you could see multiple guys that had eyes on us. And he has me pull out my phone, and he has me give me my business card. Fortunately, I had everything set up right, where my undercover card had a phone number that I had memorized, and he holds my card and he says, tell me your phone number. If I didn't have that undercover number memorized like that, we would have been shot for sure. And then he said, pull out your phone, show me your phone. And I pulled out my phone and I'm showing it to him. And he starts dialing on his phone just to make sure that it rung on mine, that the whole thing was set up. Fortunately, all the undercover stuff was set up properly. The phone rang. He smiles. He said, I like you. And then he took us to go see the kids. There's some super dangerous guys. But what was amazing to me, Jared, is that the what I call the level 1 guys, the guys selling me cocaine at 2 a.m. in downtown, some Port-au-Prince or Mexico City or wherever. Those guys, they know the street. They're dangerous nonetheless, but those are mostly guys. The level 2 ones, they're the pimps. They're the ones that are selling 20, 25-year-old women, and they control them. They're traffickers, but they have access to the children. And what I call a level 3 are the ones who physically control the children, the ones that and we need to get to a level 3. By the time you get to a level 3, the ones who are holding the kids, almost 50% of them were women. I was like, how does that happen? Right? How does that happen? A lot of them were trafficked themselves when they were younger and ended up working with the traffickers later and being groomers with them. So the real question is, how do we fix this? Because I realized that going undercover, pulling 20 children out at a time, that created a massive impact in that child's life. We got them back on their feet, got them in a healthy home or back to their parents. But if not enough was being done to fix the demand, then 20 more children would be sucked back into the recesses of hell to fill it. So what we have to figure out is how to fix that. And we've got operators right now who are averaging over 20 pedophiles a month that they are arresting. And every single one of those pedophiles represent 10 to 100 children that they would abuse at some time in their life. So getting them off the streets is super important. But at the same time, you've got to figure out what got that woman to the point where she thought it was okay to continue selling kids. And what got that trafficker to the point where he thought that it was okay to be making money, building the sex hotel for kids that he was going to be selling. And what is it that takes people down that dark road where they're part of the demand side? And that's the question we have to ask. We all sit back and think that pornography is a victimless crime. You're in the privacy of your own office. You're looking at your computer. Nobody cares. Nobody matters. Whatever. What people don't understand is what that does to your mind. When you take a woman from a divine feminine to an object, you start going down a dark road. In fact, anytime we start objectifying somebody else, anytime that we put ourselves in a place where we look at another human being as anything other than a divine child of God, anytime we go down that road, then if arrogance and ego start coming in and just or people dealing with their own pain that they haven't resolved, and they're taking that out on other people in anger and physical abuse and even sexual abuse. And then they continue down this road, and their pornography goes from being addicted to some hardcore pornography to needing something harder to have that same fix, just like a drug. And for some of them, a little bit harder is a little bit younger. Pretty soon they're fantasizing about something they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies. So yes, that is a big contributing factor. Now, everybody who's listening to us right now, almost everybody has seen pornography, right? Just because you've seen pornography doesn't mean you're becoming a pedophile. But every one of these guys that we arrested started out with a hardcore addiction. Then you have to ask yourself, what is it that takes people down that dark road? And how do we break that chain way, way, way before a child is involved?
Yeah. That is the question. I mean, what is it that takes people down any kind of a path that is really, not even necessarily sadistic, but inflicting pain on other people, and what is it that, I don't know. It's just so interesting when you think about the spark and that light of God that everybody is born with, and then over time, what is it that kind of diminishes and then eventually snuffs that out? And sometimes it's being forced on you from other people, like what you're talking about with these children. But a lot of times we just allow life to just get to us and just forget where we came from, and forget that, like you said, every single one of us is a divine child of God. And the moment we forget that and place other things in front of that, I think that that just kind of enables us to start going down paths that we normally wouldn't go. And it's sad. And ultimately, you asked what can we do about that? And I think clearly, to solve the problem completely, only God can do that. And but us as people here on this earth, especially ones that allow our physical to overcome everything else, because it's interesting, Paul, as you're describing these situations. I like to get into try to get into people's minds. And, I talk to criminal psychologists and serial killer type of experts. And what is it about, is it a trigger somewhere, something that just clicks and makes them go a different path, when they get to the top of whatever mountain they're climbing, and, instead of going the safe direction and the more humane direction, they go this other way. And, is there something that snaps? And typically not, but there's always going to be choices that people make. And I think even these traffickers, especially, it's just mind-boggling to think that a guy can love his own children, or at least, have some relationship with his 3-year-old, and yet go to work, work when I, in quotations, and be able to, I mean, it's a child.
Yeah.
It is a poor, innocent child that can't fight back. I mean, this child has no options against you. And to I don't know, that's just, I don't think most people even comprehend the amount of evil and callousness that it takes to actually do that.
Yeah.
Thank God. It's one of those where, how blessed are we that most people don't understand how to and can't do that, and would never be able to do that. But the people that can are the ones that I just think that just allow themselves to get so dark inside, and so I don't know if they're bitter, if they're just damaged. They just say, screw it. I've gone down this far. It doesn't matter from now on. What I do. But I don't know. I look at these these situations, and I'm like, what are these people? What is it that has brought them to this point that they could actually do that?
Yeah. Number one, it's a separation from God. And that's really the answer of eradicating child trafficking, is bringing people to that understanding of who they really are and where they came from, and that connection with God, and listening to that still small voice of truth that we were all born with. I have a book that'll be coming out in a few months. It's called Are You Listening? With My Hand on My Heart. Not with my hand on my ear, but my hand on my heart. And it's because every single one of these operations, in finding these children, I wasn't following logic and protocol. I was being led, and led to keep safe, led to where the children were. And so many things in life are that way. And if we stop listening, then it's easy to get off track. And then that still small voice gets quieter and quieter and more difficult to hear, because you're being consumed by rage and anger and greed and lust and things that are a very low energy vibration that are taking you away from that space of peace and love and progression. And so, yes, that is the answer. That is the answer. I believe that I was allowed to see the darkest recesses of hell so that I could then come out and say, okay, now that I have your attention, let's talk about this. Really, what is it going to take to fix this? And that's the answer right there. That's what we all need to come to understand, is that all of us have fallen short. All of us have sinned. All of us have been in a place sometime in our life where we were out of integrity in some way. But if we just hold on to that pain and that guilt and that and don't forgive ourselves and don't move on, then the dark side can use that as a tool to say, well, you've already effed up there. Let's try this. Or, you've already effed up there. Now let's try this. And that's that dark road. Those are those steps that is leading you away from that place of truth and light and love and forgiveness for yourself and others. And so releasing that trauma that happened to you, and releasing the fact that you aren't the same man today that you were 5 years ago. And, I'm no saint. I'm on my third marriage, and most of that was my fault. But I'm in a really good place today. And I've come to a place after having been in the pit of hell personally and seeing even worse in these situations, that this is a battle we can win, and we can eradicate child trafficking. And now understand this, I'm not, people say, oh, you needed every one of those traffickers that we worked with. I would do everything in my power to ensure they never, ever, ever, ever hurt another child again. But I look at the entire situation. The guys who simply have pornography addictions right now, a lot of them who are listening to us right now, having compassion for them, for whatever it was that they were missing in their life that made them think that objectifying a woman in that way was something that was fulfilling, right? And understand that is a step away from the light. That is a step towards that direction that we don't want to be. And we also need to understand that, the things that we're being fed by by Hollywood and big media and social, all these things that we're being force fed by agendas that are not in line with the moral compass that you were taught. We need to be aware of what's coming in. This movie was finished many years ago. And we finished it over 5 years ago. And it took a long time to get it out. We were blocked everywhere from distribution. And the only way to bring this message to the world was having a system like Angel Studios, where it was a grassroots movement. I say it this way. We brought it to the people by the people. The investors in it was people like myself and others. We didn't have big Hollywood that was investing. We did have Fox that put some money in, but then they were bought out by Disney. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so we were forced to come up with some money to buy them out. And it just sat for years. But now with this new wave, we take it to the world, which is just exciting.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're good, Jared.
How is it that Disney wouldn't distribute this? I mean, them being, they most of their legacy and making, their business model is all about children. And yet here we have a movie that is actually doing good for children and exposing there's no way they don't know that this problem is happening.
Of course.
And yet they wouldn't put it.
I believe Disney's agenda today is very different from the original vision that Walt had. I'll just put it that way. And you can see that slow but sure shift to taking away from the family values that were in the beginning with Walt. So that's the $1 million question, and that everybody needs to ask themselves: why were these big distribution companies not interested? Why would some companies that would put cuties on their platform not take Sound of Freedom? For you listeners don't know, I mean, cuties is horrible. We're talking 10-year-olds strip dancing, and provocative crap. It was sickening that would be put out as a TV series. And then Netflix said, "Nah, we're not going to take Sound of Freedom." Really? What does that say? So we just have to be hyper aware of what's being brought into our homes, into our minds, and into our children's minds, and where that's taking everything. I don't think that there could have been a movement for 3-year-olds deciding on sex change operations, or not 3-year-olds, third graders deciding on sex change operations for themselves, and fifth graders deciding that they want to be identified as a furry. Are you kidding me? You think that would have happened 20 years ago? No. What has happened in our society that makes people think that that's okay in any way?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of it is just pure propaganda, because the interesting thing is, if you look at what, the experts say that people actually want versus what is actually successful. And I think Sound of Freedom is the perfect example, but, they say that they don't want masculine men, that toxic masculinity and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to get too far away from the focus, of your movie and what we're talking about here. But if you look at all the really successful films, Maverick, the Top Gun Maverick, and some of these other movies where the entire story is oriented around a masculine man, heroes overcoming evil, and those are the ones that hit $1 billion. And then you look at Sound of Freedom, and the fact that movie has sat on the shelf for 5 years is appalling. That is just, and again, thank you, Paul, for doing what you did, and for all the others that worked so hard to bring that movie to life, and even financing that movie. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's like, how many people would have never really come to the true realization that child trafficking is as prevalent as it is without that movie? How many people is it going to wake up and thank all the things that are good in life that is actually coming to play. And the fact that it's hit $160 million now.
Yeah.
And what was it projected? 20 million at the very beginning. It's like, the people that, frankly, the people that worked to suppress it should be called out.
Yeah.
Because I think if most most people in society are good people. And most people in society, I guarantee, agree with everything that we're talking about right now. But, most people are also so busy with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis that they just don't have time, and they don't have, just the mental capacity, the openings to do anything about this. And plus, it's like what you said, what do we do about it? And so many people say this problem is so massive. What can I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability to do anything about it. So it's not something I can worry about. So I can't. And, but I think this movie has really opened up everybody's eyes and say, no, you can. And frankly, the message at the very end of the movie, where Jim Caviezel comes out and he says, this is what you can do. If you can afford one ticket, an extra ticket, to pay for somebody that maybe can't, so they can see this movie and be inspired by it. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And boy, I definitely need to ask you what it was like to work with him. I mean, he just seems, he's one of my favorite actors. The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite all-time movies.
Yeah.
And, he is just such a,
I have to tell you
such an amazing
funny side story. I tell people that Jesus told me to buy a Harley. And they're like, what? So we were in Colombia, we were filming, and there was a couple nights where it was just me and Jim, just sitting at dinner and talking, and he was going through a bunch of pictures on his phone of some beautiful bikes and his Harley. He had a bunch of beautiful pictures of his Harley, and then he comes to this picture of this black. It is gorgeous. This is it is so beautiful. And he said, now this is the nicest bike I have ever seen. He said this millionaire bought it and put like $20,000 into it after he bought it, before he ever even drove it a mile. And then his doctor told him that he couldn't, because of his back. So he can't drive it. So he took it back into the dealership, and then Jim looks at me and he said, Paul, now you have a Harley, right? And I said, no, I don't have a Harley. And then he goes into his Jesus voice. He's like, Paul, you need to buy this Harley, right? And then he picks up his phone and he calls the Ventura, California dealership that it was at. He goes, hey, this is Jim Caviezel. They're like, yeah. He said, hey, that black Harley that came in, that millionaire brought in, is that still there? And they said, well, yeah, actually, we just got the paperwork this morning. There's a couple of people interested in it, but they haven't paid for it. And he goes, I have a cash buyer right now. And he didn't even ask me, right? He said, I have a cash buyer right now. And he hands me the phone. I'm like, okay. So I give him my Amex and buy this motorcycle literally 4 minutes after I saw the picture of it, because Jesus told me to. And we ended up doing, we did this ride all the way down to the big motorcycle rally in Vegas, Laughlin, Nevada, and a bunch of others with it together, me and Jim and some other guys. So anyway, yeah. So Jesus told me to buy a Harley.
Well, if Jesus told you to do it, then
that's right.
Not even the wife can complain about
Exactly.
that one, right? Fantastic. Yeah, I've had some motorcycles, when I was younger and growing up in Idaho, but yeah, my wife, there's no way she would let me buy one of those right now. So anyway, yeah, my gosh, Paul, I could talk to you all day, but I know you're a busy man and don't want to keep you too much longer. But one thing, as a former military man, went through, Ranger training and all of that. And I have to ask you about, and especially because there's so many, police officers, sheriff's deputies that listen to the show. What was it like working with these operators? I mean, tell me what, first of all, that Hollywood depicts these guys in a certain way, but, I mean, from personal experience, I know what kind of men these are, but I wanted to hear your side of it. What are these guys like?
The best people I know are in law enforcement. In fact, I have for years, I made a decision many, many years ago that a large percentage of my money and my time would go to charity. I made that decision in my early 20s. And at first I'm like, okay, where do I donate it? Do I give it to the Save the Trees? Do I give it to the guy on the side of the street that's asking me for drug money? What feels right? And I decided to focus in two areas. Number one, anything that had to do with children. And number two, anything that had to do with the men and women who are putting their lives on the line to preserve my way of life and my freedom. And so I'm an honorary colonel for the Unified Police Department and the Salt Lake Police Department. Really good men and women that I've had opportunities to serve with in some undercover work. We've had a few of their deputies that have come and helped us in some of these operations. Sean Reyes here in Utah, we've done a bunch of stings. His team is behind this in better than anybody that I've ever seen in eradicating trafficking here in Utah and fighting that and fighting it on a global scale as well. He helped to change some laws in Washington that made it easier for us to do that job. I also am a board member for the Federal Enforcement Homeland Security Foundation, which pays for the funerals of fallen federal officers. I've worked with the 1033 Foundation in Utah that also pays for fallen officers here, pays for their funerals and family expenses, etc. Because those, in fact, the only businesses that I invested in after I retired from Bridge and I was doing the undercover work, I invested in a company specifically for the reason of keeping our officers safe. It was a bulletproof armor company that does bulletproofing for the police cars and the vests and everything else. Because if my money can go not only from a charity standpoint, I would rather not be giving the money to a funeral. I'd be rather take that same money and invest it into protection so that that officer can stay safe, because I have so much love and respect for the good men and women in law enforcement. And I will say this, some of our former special operators, our military guys, and they weren't as good undercover because they were trained with their night vision goggles and their backup support and their guns and everything else. When you're face to face with traffickers, you don't have those weapons, right? You're there with your hands and your mind and your communication with them. And so, and you don't have somebody up on a rooftop with a gun that's protecting you from your backside. You don't have that. You're out in some pretty dangerous areas. And there's many good men and women in law enforcement that have been a part of that. And when we go into country, we don't go in Rambo style, hey, we're going to go find these kids. No, that we start with sitting down with the head of the federal police, the head of anti-trafficking nationwide. And we say, listen, here's the deal. We will pay for everything. We will do a lot of the work and we will train your people. And we will give you the credit because your country can't know that we were undercover. They have to think that your officers arrested 20 traffickers, 20 Americans, and rescued more than 100 children. And then your people will create a motivation and support for your good men and women to continue that when we're gone. Those are the real heroes that continue. In fact, months later, after the Cartagena, Colombia one, the one that was depicted in the movie, we had operators go back in and ask, talking to the guys on the street, the guys selling cocaine, figuring out who was still selling kids. And they said, oh no, didn't you hear? The Colombian, the police have shut that down. They arrested all those Americans months ago. And since then, they had done 5 additional stings on their own without our help, rescuing hundreds of more children and really focusing on cleaning up the problem in their country. So those are the guys who put their life on the line every single day. And I respect you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I've worked with, police all over the world, and all of them, they may have different levels of training. They may have different capabilities, but I think all of them have the same desire in their hearts to keep their communities safe. They want to serve. They want to do it. Like I said, just like the military, nobody goes into the military for the money.
Yeah.
and nobody goes into law enforcement for the money either, because it's just not there. But the reward is knowing that they have kept somebody safe. And but those guys, they are fighting the good fight, but man, they are up against some serious problems, and defunding and DAs that won't prosecute them when they bring them in. I mean, some of these guys that I talk to that are in these big agencies and really, big jurisdictions, it's almost depressing. They spend months tracking, a drug guy, a drug dealer, or, even a sex trafficker or somebody like that. And then they finally get them. They've got all sorts of evidence. They bring it in, and, the guy's out on the street before the ink on their warrants and everything is even dry. And it's incredible that, they're just, it's almost like bringing this movie to light. Their every single effort is blocked, and there's people fighting against it to actually, bring it out. And good and evil is always going to be out there. That battle is always going to exist. We've all heard the adage that all evil has to do to succeed is for good men and women to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that movies like The Sound of Freedom and discussions like this are what, kind of exposes it and motivates people to actually do something, donate to a charity that, help with, some of your, what is your foundation that you're working with?
I'm the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation. You can go to liberatechildren.org and learn all about that. I'm also the founder of Liberating Humanity. You can go to liberating-humanity.com and get a lot of good information. In fact, you can follow me on all my social media. You can just type in Liberating and I come up first, Liberating Humanity.
Yeah. So if you are out there and you have any sort of resources, please go to these websites.
Thank you.
And donate. You may not be able to physically do anything. And like Paul said, putting on your camo and your, pulling your weapons out of your safe and heading down to Colombia to go find some missing children isn't the way to do it. There's operations in place that with more funding, they can find more children.
Yeah.
But one last thing, Paul, and we can make this quick. The cutting off the head of the snake is obviously the most important thing. So with the United States being one of the primary draws for child sex trafficking, how do we, Epstein was just the supplier. I look at him as the same as like that trafficker you were talking about down in Colombia that they portray in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a level of evil that most people can't comprehend. But the guy that can walk into that, like you said, that you were pretending to be, that you were undercover to be, the guy that can actually go into that cell, see the little girl sitting on the concrete block, knowing that she had just slept on, a metal bed, that's suspended from the wall by a chain, that guy that can actually go in there, see the situation that little girl is in, and still rape that little girl and do whatever horrible sex things, just for his own sick satisfaction. That guy is the one that we need to, take care of.
Yeah.
How do we expose and get rid of that guy?
One of the things that a lot of the logos on the different foundations I've worked with, including the Child Liberation Foundation, that our logo is a barcode with the universal symbol of something being sold, and in the center of it is a chain with a broken link. The key is breaking that link way before it gets to that point. That's the key. Once you already have a guy who's there raping a child, you've defiled innocence. You've got to the end of that chain, and there's some harsh punishments that need to be in place. But what if we could identify what links in that chain led to that, right? So we had a foundation that we were working with years ago who they had a piece of software that goes into the dark web and identifies who is physically controlling who is going on and looking and downloading child rape videos. And in 1 month, this piece of software, and it didn't catch all of them, this was just what it was able to identify. In 1 month in the United States, it identified over 800,000 unique individuals who had downloaded a child rape video. That's a huge number. Now, not all of them have become contact offenders, but what if we could grab them at that link of the chain before they become a contact offender? Or even behind that, what if we could take the ones who have these hardcore addictions and they're starting to look at rape videos and stuff like that, and give them the tools they need to step off of that path. There's so many things that we can do to break that chain before the end result happens.
Yeah. Well, that's somehow, breaking that chain.
Now we are arresting those guys. Once they've crossed that one, we've got guys all over the country working with law enforcement, working in other countries that are taking guys who are you could throw something up on a teenage chat group, and these guys are just surfing through it, and you throw up one little comment that looks like you've got a 13-year-old interested in hooking up with somebody older, you'll have a whole bunch of responses really quickly. And then you can set up stings and take all of those guys down.
Wow. Well, frankly, I think once people make that level of, they've gone down the path that far, I think the fear of being exposed is the only thing that might turn them back.
Yeah.
Because I think once they've gone that far, if they're unhindered, they won't stop. I don't think they can stop. And so that's a full level addiction that without a major intervention, they're just not going to be able to. And I think exposure, and them being caught basically is the only fear that might turn them away.
Stop them. Yeah.
But some kind of major intervention. But like you said, we have to cut the head of the snake off. So, and just being aware of it, I think, and some of the pearls that you've given us today are just fantastic, Paul. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate coming on the show and talking about it. And I know my audience is going to take these, what we've talked about today and share it and get it out there. So
thank you.
Please, everybody, go to Paul's different foundations and donate if you can, but definitely help us spread the awareness. Go see The Sound of Freedom. It is a fantastic movie, and it's a great depiction, I think, and a realistic depiction of what it is and how horrible it is for these children out there. And it's got to stop. It has to stop. I honestly, I don't believe that God will, he will not forgive us for this. if we don't do everything we can to stop it. So, Paul, any last words?
Thank you, Jared. Grateful to you. Grateful to all the men and women in law enforcement that listen to your show as well, and anybody who is using their time and their resources to fight this battle, to keep people safe, and especially to keep our children safe. So thank you.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. And Paul, we will hopefully run into you in the near future.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Jared.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.